So I'm going, so yeah, I don't know we'll see how many people tune in live, I guess. I'm going to go live on YouTube here. And then,
Going live, I'll put on a jacket.
I got to,
Good night. Good night, Matt.
hey, Jim, can you hear me?
I can hear you, Jason.
Okay. So,
You're a
yeah.
static picture now, just a photograph.
Yeah, I doing some work over here, so didn't want it to be on
Good
camera.
idea.
So for whatever reason, we're
I was going to grab one of the instruments in my room and start playing. I thought that'd be a really bad idea.
this live feed is can't figure out how to pause it.
Looks like Brian is trying to connect.
I'm here. I'm going to share my screen and see if I can pause that. I just need, you got to enable screen sharing for me, Jay.
Yeah.
Hey, Karen.
Can you hear me?
Hey, Karen.
Okay.
All right, should be up now.
We got a full village board tonight, Jason? Is the audio still on?
Yeah,
Okay.
I can hear you. Can you still see the public comment guidelines
Yes,
shared?
I can.
Okay. I
Yep,
just
those are
paused
still
it.
up.
All right. Can you see my mouse when I go over it? Can you see this?
No.
Okay. All right.
Afternoon, Mayor.
Good afternoon, Jim. How are you?
Good, how are you?
Still here.
Hey, Jim,
Hey, Wayne.
how are you?
Good. How about you tonight?
Good. Oh, there is all everybody else.
Hi, Wayne. Hi,
Hey,
Barb.
Hello.
Hey, Jason, I fixed my email so you can send it anyway now. If you're there.
I'm here. Good. We'll keep using your work email.
I got a flag too, so when we do our thing. Hey, Brian, you got a clock on top of your head there. It looks cool.
Is it spinning faster or no?
Timing's marching on.
Jeff or Jason, do I need to read the Flood Brothers public comment question? Since that was already addressed, or should I go ahead and read it as part of public comment?
I don't think that was addressed to the board. That was
And Brian, you spoke with the resident, right?
Correct.
Right, it came through as a public comment though, so I just wanted,
Okay.
I did contact the resident. She stated that she did not need it read and.
okay, great, thank you.
we only have one comment, Patty.
Yes, that's all I show.
Okay.
Good night, Karen.
Sean,
Big crowd.
Karen Young. Bruce Berkshire, Devitt, Trejo, Mansardo.
Hi, Wayne.
Hey, Jeff.
How are you?
I'm fine. How are you?
Good.
So the Cubs are ahead of the Sox so far.
Maybe the season will be canceled.
That's how we can get into the World Series.
We got everybody?
Lee's not, no video of Lee. There he is.
How's it going?
Hey,
Okay, I got 5:30 straight up, so let's call the meeting to order. If we can rise for the pledge of allegiance, please. Pledge allegiance to
To the flag
the
of the United States of America, which stands
one nation under God, indivisible, and justice.
with liberty and justice for all.
Clerk, can I have a roll call, please?
Sure. Mayor Maglio,
I am here.
Trustee Berkshire,
No audio.
he's muted. Trustee Berkshire, raise your hand. Thank you. Trustee Devitt,
Yeah.
Trustee Domke,
I am here.
Trustee Poleski,
Here.
Trustee Sarno. Here. Trustee Trejo,
Here.
you have a quorum.
All right. Can I have a motion for the acceptance of tonight's presentation of the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
All right, that was Mr. Trejo and Mr. Domke. Can I have a roll call, Madam Clerk?
Trustee Trejo,
Aye.
Trustee Domke,
Aye.
Trustee Devitt,
Aye.
Trustee Poleski,
Aye.
Trustee Sarno,
Aye.
trustee Berkshire.
Yes.
Okay. Moving right along, we'll do village board public comments. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, the village board meeting is being held virtually and is being streamlined on our YouTube channel for viewing. Madam Clerk, do we have any public comments tonight?
We do. We have one submitted by Carlo Ciccarello, and he has some questions for this board meeting. Number one, he states you've made significant progress to the 2018-2021 strategic plan. Both the plan and the actions are outstanding. Regarding the village-owned site at Roselle Road and I-390, has the board seen any interest from developers in that site? Can you also comment on any interest in the old gas station on Roselle Road and the site of Fit RX? Number two, the Village of Bloomingdale just announced they will purchase Indian Lakes Golf Course and leave it as open space. I find that this is a wonderful move by the village. Do you see any opportunity in Roselle to create additional open space now or in the future? Number three, what is the most pressing concern regarding the village budget caused by the shortage of funds due to the coronavirus? And lastly, thank you for all doing a thankless job, and the time you put into the village really matters. That's all.
Mr. Odell, can I ask you to address that, please?
Sure, I think pre-pandemic, Candy, with regards to number one, the village did have genuine interest in the village-owned site on the southwest corner of Roselle Road and the I-390. There's continued interest in the area near Fit RX, but I think since the pandemic, things have quieted a little bit. With regards to number two, I think the village board hasn't made any decision about creating additional open space. And with number three, as always, it's our revenue situation, making sure our businesses are able to do their business, and us being able to provide municipal services as we continue to do so.
Thank you, Jeff. Okay, let's move right on to the officials and staff report. Let's see, I'd ask consideration for trustee committee report regarding the home rule and discussion potential benefits and determinants of home rule, including but not limited to such items as the development of ordinances for the regarding short-term rentals.
Yeah, Mayor, I can start if that's good with you.
Thank you, David.
So Trustee Trejo and I had a chance to meet with staff, and hopefully everyone had the opportunity to review our enclosed memo. But really what we focused on was looking at home rule and how that would impact our ability to effectively regulate short-term rentals. The one thing that stood out specifically to me was really the ability to have teeth to any regulation we'd be able to have and really enforce and follow that through to the furthest extent wherever these home share kind of sites may exist, which we might have some issues with using our current framework. When we were reviewing it, we felt that if we should decide to move forward, and that's kind of what we're here tonight to do, is discuss what the board's appetite is. If we did want to move forward with doing a referendum, we felt that this upcoming November 3rd general election made the most sense. It would give us the broadest opportunity for public to participate. Typically, we have 270% higher turnout during a presidential election in Roselle compared to our primary or consolidated elections in April, which I think makes sense. And then two other notes that Lee and I felt very passionately about was, should we decide to move forward, we think it's appropriate for us to lay out what that type of regulation would look like, and adopting an internal policy or having a temperature of the room of what we would want to do. Other communities that have gone through the process of getting home rules, such as Westchester, Downers Grove, have used internal policies to help restrict future use of some of the new authorities, specifically in regards to how boards can levy property taxes or other revenue drivers. There's a lot of interesting things that we could discuss in detail there, but I think those are the the main points we wanted to get out there tonight and open, and ideally we'd like to have direction as far as, do we want to have staff put an item on our next agenda to actually approve and have a referendum question put out there for the upcoming election. Lee, is there anything that you wanted to add, or Jeff?
Yeah, real quick. So first, just thank you, Mr. Mayor, for appointing Trustee Pulaski and I to this important subcommittee. I agree with everything Trustee Pulaski had mentioned. I think the other key point that we wanted to really hammer home is the transparency aspect of it. So that was one of the reasons why we wanted to move forward with the general election. Like he was saying earlier, that the voter turnout is a lot higher. So there's more residents who could inform the decision on whether or not we want to go with home rule or not to regulate the Airbnbs. I think the other thing is we wanted full transparency to have the community understand the benefits, the risks, the potential pitfalls of home rule, and weigh everything together, all the evidence, all their opinions together to say, yes, I want to vote for home rule, or no, I don't.
Jeff, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, just my supplemental memo, the trustees, co-chairs asked me to make sure I put some procedural requirements in there with dates and all that, as David has mentioned. If the board is interested in placing a question on the ballot, there's a date in there of August 17th. Our board would have to approve a resolution directing that. Also, with early voting in mind, and that availability in DuPage County and Cook, I highlighted that in my memo. I think David Lee might have been going down the road of a self-limitation ordinance policy. Might want to be mindful of that date too. So,
Bruce, you had a question, but you're on mute.
No, he's
Bruce?
He can't.
Oh, you can't.
Jason, do you have the ability, or Patty, to unmute him?
I do not.
We need to change that.
There we go.
So that's not the topic I've raised my hand on, but we need to have the ability to mute and unmute ourselves. So I'm curious to understand what your thoughts are in terms of what your plans in terms of this short-term rental, and what are you planning, or what can you get out of home rule that you can't get from an ordinance? And then that's question one. And question two is, what are you proposing we would be doing? That's to David or Lee.
So we didn't come up with the policy. I think that's for us to discuss. But I think if you looked at staff's supplementary memo, really what comes up is we have broader flexibility to actually apply it. So we can do some zoning controls, but the extent to which we can actually enforce those and go about applying those can be somewhat restrictive in some regards. As far as from my personal standpoint, I don't think we should ban them all together. I think there are plenty of people who do this. They do it correctly. They have the best intentions. And to say that everyone in the village is now forbidden from utilizing their home to have a supplementary income for those that are going to be on the site and premise is overly restrictive and an overreach. And so here we could do things such as apply licensing, so that way people who would like to list online would have to be registered with the village, pay a fee. They'd have to meet certain requirements. We could require that each site has to follow certain nuisance ordinances that we have to be respectful to the neighbors, which would prevent partying and other things, which I think are very specifically relevant to the incident that occurred on Picton, and allowing us to really, in my mind, this is a digital thing. It's shared economy. It's not locally based. And so by having the broader ability to control the IT licensing platforms, that gives us the extraterritorial enforcement to really go after it, that zoning would probably restrict us or prevent us from doing to the fullest extent.
So the only thing I get out of this is a license, because everything else you just described, I can get out of zoning. And you don't have any further teeth, if you will, by home rule versus a zoning and or regulation. I mean, we've postponed our thoughts, but I'm not going to be for this, or the fact that we're trying to use this as a means to prohibit in any way, shape, or form other than licensing someone for Airbnb. My restriction was simply that we go down a path of limiting it so that it's no less than 3-day rental, and that someone gets registered in the village to have the knowledge of who is doing that. Because when we get a legitimate event in here, such as the Ryder Cup, there are many homes that will do that to try and leverage the golfers and all of the other individuals that are associated with that. And so understanding putting a license in place is of importance, but beyond that, and having it where maybe we were thinking of restricting it to a 3-day, anything else is not in my wheelhouse for this home rule. So, and just putting that flat out there. So you need to come up with something that is beyond this short-term rental on why I should look towards home rule. Because again, from my discussions with Jeff and Patrick and putting words in your gentleman's mouth, I can knock this out by saying no less than 3 days, and you can potentially ask people to register here at the village. You may not be able to enforce it, but I can ask of that.
Bruce, if I could just ask a clarifying question, would you do anything about the nuisance side? Because in my opinion, the biggest problem is the party that occurred. A 3-day limit doesn't prevent an incident like that occurring again. To me, I think it's really important to enforce and have the ability to restrict the usage of those and to make sure that we're not having, neighbors being disrespected by a large party being hosted at a house.
David, I could have a party right now for 3 days, and if I decide to do so, I can do it. And the only nuisance would be is if my neighbors called the police department. So what is that any different than your short-term rental approach?
Mr. Domke, you were next.
Yeah, I'd like to ask, first of all, I really like the idea that you put in there that if we did go home rule, that we could put some safeguards on to cap what we could do to raise any taxes or anything like that. And I know every board would have the chance to change that, but I think home rule gives local control to villages, and quite frankly, the only 2 villages that don't have it around us are Itasca and Wooddale. Everybody else has it. Some by the 25,000 person rule, and like in Bloomingdale's case, where they actually had an external threat of something, and the residents decided that home rule would help them to handle threats like that. We have a different kind of threat, first kind we ever encountered in my lifetime here. And putting teeth into something, capping what you just said, David, that means a lot to me, especially as a homeowner and even as a landlord. That these restrictions are not anything that would hurt me. I do understand if we had a golf tournament that you could put some different caveats on the home rule ordinances that would allow for special purposes and special events. And so I would be more in favor of a home rule, especially right now. And then I also looked at the state of Illinois and Springfield, where communities have had a chance to rescind their home rule because they don't like it. And that would still be the case in Roselle if we had home rule, that it could go before the voters again to take it away if they didn't like what home rule was doing. And in the case of Springfield, the report that I got over the internet was that 87% of communities that have home rule have kept it. So it's not the big, scary monster that people made it out to be. And quite frankly, home rule has become more of a popular thing with residents in other towns. So I would be in favor of it, at least as far as what I know about it and what our plan would be. I still don't hear all the bells and whistles of what we would do in Roselle, but I as of now, I would be in favor of home rule for sure.
Bruce?
Andy, my final comment then would be is this: if we're going to go down that path, it's got to be more than a fear monger of short term because of an incident in Picton. So if there's something more beneficial for home rule than just this fact of short term, I may be in favor for it. But other than that, you got to get me something more than just this, because I can deal with this in ordinances.
Patrick?
Sorry, that's my opinion at this point.
No problem. Patrick?
I am totally on the same page as Bruce. I think he said it perfectly. The only other thing I would add is these are things that we could do now and not have to wait. As a reminder, if this does go on the referendum ballot in November, we're waiting, another 100 days for this to go through. And in the meantime, we could be working on the items that Bruce had said right away and take care of it without having to wait. For instance, if it doesn't pass, we're in the same boat. So those are things to consider.
Lee, did you have something you wanted to say?
Yeah, I just wanted to touch base in terms of Bruce's question. I mean, from my point of view, kind of what Trustee Pulaski was saying, I don't know that this is necessarily, a recommendation to say, hey, we do need home rule for sure. It's more or less to lay out what could be done and what can't be done under home rule versus the zoning. So I think I was under the impression that we were going to get feedback from yours and Patrick's subcommittee here to determine next steps in terms of just to have everyone on the board understand what can and can't we do under zoning versus home rule, and then make the decision on if we wanted to go try to get the referendum or not.
And Lee, I'm sorry, I'm going to jump in, Wayne. My understanding was we were to put a hold on our committee while you came back with a benefit, pros and cons of home rule, regardless of this situation, but home rule in a general, so that we can make a better understanding of what the value of home rule is. If it is simply going to be on this, then we as that committee will get started immediately because we already had ideas and discussions on it.
Yeah, I mean, I think no matter
We'll
what,
put our stuff in place.
To Patrick's point, even if we move forward with home rule, I mean, we would still want to do something in zoning while we can, as we wait for the results of the election, if we end up deciding to put it on the ballot or not. So I think I thought that they were going on a parallel path.
I guess there's a breakdown then, because we were understood to hold off on any kind of further discussions till we kind of figure out the value of what is home rule going to get us in both this as well as in general. And from there, we can then go. But if that's the case, we'll kick our stuff back up and we'll make the discussions that we had with Karen, and we'll move forward with our recommendations on an ordinance.
And I know Jeff tried to put together a handful of, sort of other flexibilities in terms of home rule on the memo, in terms of various codes, municipal code enforcement, broader zoning abilities, better bond ratings, because essentially we have a lower bond rating right now because we're not home rule. And then also the financial flexibility aspect of it. So potentially, for example, you could pass a gas tax of, let's say, 2 cents or whatever that is, and get rid of the vehicle stickers, for example. And then the tax burden would shift more to people who are traveling through Roselle, as well as residents as well, buying gas, but you would eliminate the vehicle sticker. That's just one example that we put out there.
I see you, Mr. Domke. I wanted to make sure everybody was clear with their comment.
So these are good points. These little like the vehicle sticker and things what we can do with the zoning even before we're home rule. I understand that. I would also like to say that I would really like to see what the residents think of home rule, even if it's just something we put on a referendum and it doesn't pass, or it does pass. And the other thing is putting all these pros and cons together. It appears as though we don't have those in front of us right now. But I'm open-minded enough. I would like to see the pros and cons. But home rule is something that gives you more of a control of things in your village. And who knows where this is all going to go. Anyway, I think maybe, are we going to have enough time to have one more meeting to see the pros and cons specifically, and then have enough time to say, yeah, let's put it on the referendum and see what happens? Do we have enough time? Is the next meeting going to be enough time?
So Wayne, and for everyone else, I would say if you go to page 5 of the memo under operational impacts of home rule on the village, staff did outline under 5 different areas to what Lee spoke to earlier of what that impact would be like. If the board would like to see something more robust, and we can do there's plenty of material out there. We're trying to give a nice high level summary. if the board's intention is to have something that's more robust and has everything outlined to the T, we could certainly come back and provide that. I would argue probably relatively quickly because we have that information. We just try to distill it to make it a little bit more friendly for everyone. And, you know, if this is something we need to come back and, you know, discuss at the next meeting or do a special meeting, I think that's something that I would be open to. But I think the whole idea here is there are a lot of things that fall under home rule, but the whole idea that I've heard, and we've heard many public comment, people want us to be able to regulate, but also enforce some of these restrictions on short-term rentals. And the question to me is not whether you support home rule or not, but do you want to have the public's thoughts and opinions on how aggressively do we want to pursue this? We can make regulations by zoning ordinance, but there's a certain limitation to how far we can go with that. And, you know, I know we're mincing words at this point, but it's a very different beast at the end of the day to me.
Mhm.
Go ahead, Bruce.
David, that's the exact point that I just made. We are reacting to a situation of fear. And so until you then tell me what you're going to be able to do on that situation and with what restrictions and teeth and ramifications there are going to be that I cannot get from the police department today when I pick up the phone because someone is calling and making a nuisance, I would be fully against this. Because I'm not going to react to a situation like that because I can deal with it by putting in zoning. I could even restrict it if I wanted to in any residential neighborhood and put it simply just like we did the cannabis stuff. So if we want to go down that path, I need to better understand what those things are. And I want it in detail, not words of, well, we can put a license in place. I want to know what the police department can do. I want to know what we can do differently than we can from an ordinance. Otherwise, we are just reacting.
Jeff?
Patrick, anything?
Yeah, if you don't mind, Jeff, just exactly what he said. And we want to make sure that we're 100% transparent with the community on exactly what we're looking to achieve on this. We should not be, you know, a knee-jerk reaction on one incident that happened that, you know, we're pushing this through. So I'm totally with Bruce on this, and I want to make sure that we have our ducks in a row. If we can't make the November, then, you know, we want to do this right. We don't want to push it through. We want to be transparent. We want all the information in front of us before we say yes. Is how I feel.
Wayne, hang on a second. Mr. Odell, you had something you wanted to say.
Sure. I think my supplemental memo, to David's point, provides a higher level review of the different authority we have as a non-home rule and a home rule community. Certainly, can we dig a little deeper and provide more specificity? We can ask our village attorney to opine on that. With regards to the operational impacts, as David mentioned, there are many authorities you have as a home rule community versus a non-home rule. We can certainly provide more specificity in that. I think for the purpose of this meeting, we were interested in knowing if the board felt that this was the type of question we could have the community chime in on. If the board wants more specificity to both those areas that I outlined, we can certainly have a special meeting of the board and bring that information back to provide the timeliness to make sure that if the board decides to move forward, we can meet that August 17th date.
My answer would be yes to that, because if we're building the case on what is listed in 6.8.1 in the agenda, then yes, we need more insight, because that's what we're building it off of, is that component, nothing else. No one else is seeing anything else in the agenda. They're seeing that.
Mr. Domke?
So, as in the word of fear, I don't have a fear of putting it on the referendum. If we lay out all the cards on the pros and cons and let the residents make the choice, that's not a fear. That's basic. We can't do anything. We can't do anything unilaterally. We can't do this thing. This has to be voted on by the residents. If the residents say, yes, I think we should have this, this is the time for them to be saying that, not 2 years from now or a year from now. This is the time, because home rule is become something to look at considering things that happen. I'm not afraid of things happening. I'm afraid of not making a decision. And this thing at this moment in time seems to be a relevant decision for the residents of Roselle. If we can make it, it's the bottom line is we're asking them to tell us what to do. And I do not have a fear of that.
But in that case, Wayne, you're informing them only on one topic, and
We're
that
not
topic
talking,
is the
we're not
short term.
talking about just what happened. We're talking about all the other nuances that home rule can provide. And to your point and everybody's point, we need to see them in like a column by column thing. You can do this with home rule. You can't do that with home rule.
And then
that's
that
what
needs
you
to
would-
go out to the residents.
And that's what you would
Right.
do if you were throwing a campaign out for a proposal. And that's what I'm thinking that David and Lee have done is made this something of a proposal that needs to be voted on by our village because we have less than 25,000 people.
So Wayne, just one thing, I just want to make it very clear. We as a board and as a governing body are only allowed to present factual information. Should we go forward with it? There is no campaign for or against it. We are simply here to state facts and let the public decide. We are not here to play games. So I just want to make that clear.
Since Bruce said he's not in favor of it, I thought I'd say I'm in favor of it. But I was just as easily able to be neutral on this whole thing because I really want to see it side by side. And if the residents say, no, this isn't acceptable, I can live with that.
No,
But it'd be
absolutely.
nice
I
to
just
see it now.
the
know.
campaign part just made me a little bit nervous. So I just wanted to just make
It's
that
not a
clear.
campaign. It's like you have to put it out there so that the voters are informed. That's
Right.
all I'm saying. Yeah.
And I will say this, we did initially go down the road of trying to make it a check kind of box situation. I would say the one thing is I'm sure we all have appreciation for the legality and how things are done in the state of Illinois and with municipalities gets very murky. And so I don't know if we could get to that simple of a form, but we can definitely provide the additional details because that was one thing that we as a group struggled on because it isn't as simple as there's a check mark here and a check mark there. And so I'm not withholding information or trying to make this difficult intentionally. It's because we're trying to make this as factual as possible without getting into a kind of a law dissertation on the finer points of home rule and municipal authority and Dillon's law in the state of in the country, frankly, for that.
Bottom line is to, by the 17th of August, we need to decide if we want to go forward and put this on the ballot or not. That's basically what we're going to do.
Mr. Trejo, I thank you for your patience, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to reiterate the points, like David was saying, this memo that we had, that we wrote up, it's not a statement in support or against the initiative. So for example, I could vote no, David could vote yes, Wayne could vote yes, however that, you decide in the voting booth. The comment regarding this specifically around short-term rentals, we also made it clear that we didn't want to only provide information about short-term rentals. We wanted to have several sort of webinars, opportunities for feedback or questions from the community. And that's why I was saying earlier in terms of, I want the public to be best informed to say, okay, if I believe short-term rentals are a problem and I want the village to do more, and then I go through a webinar and I hear frequently asked questions, I hear the pluses and minuses of home rule on a factual basis, I go in the voting booth and I make that conclusion on, okay, on the one hand, I want them to do something about short-term rentals. And on the other hand, maybe this gives them too much power, so I'm going to vote no, for example. So that's kind of what we were thinking about. We weren't necessarily tying this specifically to the short-term rentals. And, obviously, one of the reasons we're looking at it is because, to David's point earlier, all the feedback that we've gotten through public comment has been regarding why aren't you doing more with short-term rentals?
Okay. Go ahead.
My final comment then is, we will proceed with the committee that you have established, Mr. Mayor. We will put our ordinances in place and we will communicate to the village and the residents of Roselle what we have done. We will do things like what we talked of, putting restrictions on the timeline of which those can be done. We'll look at where those areas can happen. We will also look at whether or not there could be special privileges, such as when an event such as the Ryder Cup comes in. We will get those. I will ask Jeff to get that committee back up and going as early as next week instead of waiting to the delay. And we will then publish and present those to the board. And then we will communicate those out to the Village of Roselle.
Okay, lady, yes, Mike.
One last thing. Would that also then be, we would look at what home rule would allow those zoning ordinances to be? So that we could put that right next to it to say, okay, this is what we can do without home rule, and this is what home rule would provide on that specific ordinance. And then
If
we
that
can
group-
see.
If that group so desires to put that together, absolutely.
That would
Our
be
charter
good.
was something different.
Right. Okay.
Yes, Patrick.
So yeah, our committee will move forward with that. All I ask is of the other committee is a document or some kind of information guide that we will be able to use for transparency to the citizens on what we exactly are looking home rule to do. If we pass it, these are the things that we plan on doing. These are some myths and whatnot, so that the voters are informed and they know exactly what we plan on doing and hold us accountable.
The purpose of this assignment was what we're all here to do is what will benefit the residents in the village of Roselle. Okay, that was the goal and that's what I want to determine. I did not say, and I understand that, Bruce, to your comment that home rule would go into effect if it got passed at a later date. That's when I would use my zoning. I wanted both committees to work together and bring out those pros and cons of what is going to benefit it in every situation for the situation that happened on Picton and for us moving forward. So that's what we're really shooting for. So, I mean, let's use this to our advantage. Let's use this to our advantage of what it's going to, how we're going to benefit from our choices and what's going to be the best one to make for a choice to benefit, not only in this particular circumstances, but for the village moving forward. So I appreciate the dialogue between everybody. I appreciate the truthful comments. If we want to get something on the ballot, and I hate to do this to my staff, we do have that time crunch. So I would like to expedite your finding as much as we possibly can. Mr. Odell, you're itching there. Go ahead.
Could I recommend that if the board is interested in a special meeting, depending on the two committees, that we meet a week from today, a Monday night, or at another date that would allow us to meet with the committees to get some further direction from our village attorney. We could do that on August 3rd, which is the Monday at 5:30. We're open to meet any other time.
Sure. I mean, whatever we have to do to get it done.
Yep.
Is what I want to press at. But I'd like to have an answer as not to, so we're not, I don't want to rush through something just to get it done and us make a mistake doing it.
So to make sure I'm clear as a staff, would staff's direction be to meet with the two committees and then have the two committees provide a report at the August 3rd special meeting?
That's what I'm hearing.
It would work. If we can do it.
Yeah, I think from the home rule side, we have a lot of the material already. It's just about bringing it down. So I feel very confident we have all the things we need. Obviously, I know we shifted gears on the zoning side. So Bruce or Pat, do you think that's something that we could do?
Patrick? Yes, we'll
Um,
check our schedule and see what we could do. I don't want to commit to it right now, but I got a busy week, but we'll see what we could do and try to have something.
I am out of pocket tomorrow night, and I am out of town Thursday and Friday, so that leaves Wednesday night before a third meeting.
Yeah, I can't do Wednesday or Thursday.
We just kind of paused for a little bit. So I guess then to that point, Jeff, to your comment, can we have it in a different meeting night other than a Monday next week? With the exception of Wednesday, I could meet, or I mean, exception of Tuesday, I can meet any day next week as a group, as a board meeting, if that works for everyone else. But I just don't know if we're going to be able to get in before Monday.
It seems like the important thing is the Home Rule Committee, Feasibility Committee. We could meet with them this week and prepare what David and Lee have asked about, maybe drill down a bit more on those areas. And certainly then we can follow up and meet with Bruce and Patrick soon thereafter. And then you could report back on August 10th. I don't know if that works.
Well, I guess the question then is are we voting yes or no on the 3rd?
You don't have to, because you still have till August 17th.
And I'd be fine with that as long as I didn't have to make a decision on the 3rd.
Okay.
I think Lee has a question, Andy.
Yes, Lee.
Just one more point, because I know Patrick brought it up in terms of what we're quote unquote planning to do with home rule. I don't think that we would be able to sort of come up with in general, what we plan to do. Obviously, anything that happens as a result of home rule would require either the mayor to put it on the agenda or 4 trustees, and then obviously to have it voted on. So I think the point we were trying to make was, number one, here's the list of powers that it gives a municipality. And obviously they're very broad. So to come up with a specific plan, I don't think is really feasible. The only thing that we did make a specific recommendation on was for the board to vote to abide by the PTEL property tax extension that a non-home rule municipality has to abide by. And again, to Jeff's point, that's something that any future board could take a vote to rescind, but at least it would be somewhat of a buffer where future boards would have to make that determination to overturn that ordinance. Because other than that, there's so many different things that can be done. I don't know that we were necessarily going to have a recommendation on specific things outside of short-term rentals. But your comment might have been specific around short-term rentals. I wasn't sure.
So then we're going to align for another meeting between Patrick and Bruce to meet with you, Jeff, before the next meeting.
Special board meeting for August 3rd at 5:30.
Okay.
Is that correct, David and Lee?
I'm sorry, could you say that again? You kind of broke up on my end.
Sorry about that. My direction I thought I heard was to schedule a special board meeting of the board to have another report of the Home Rule Feasibility Committee, and then meet at the soonest possible date for Patrick and Bruce regarding the zoning side of things. And then report that back to the board at August 10th regular meeting. That's what I heard.
Yeah, I mean, in my point of view is that if Patrick and Bruce need a little bit more time, I would rather schedule the meeting for another day where we could really look at home rule versus zoning in one special meeting. And then we could make a determination on if the board doesn't want to move forward with putting a referendum on the ballot, that's fine. But at least I'd rather have it in one meeting. That way we can have a discussion about it and say, okay, so if this is in zoning, what can we do this in home, if this is home rule, can we do it in zoning? And have Jim's opinion on one meeting where we could just finalize it instead of having another meeting that just talks about home rule. And then we go to the next one to talk about zoning, and then people forget what we talked about during the home rule discussion. I just think it's more fresh in everyone's mind to have it in one meeting.
Yeah,
Lee, I would agree. I would propose that if on the 3rd, Patrick, Jeff, and myself, and Karen, and even if Jim can join us, we can meet the committee on the ordinance. We can come back with our recommendations and our proposal, and so that we can then at the same time look at those in comparison to home rule, and we could as easily have the discussion later that week if we want to get a special meeting, or we just simply carve out time on the 10th to like a committee of the whole where we sit down and talk through all of that on that day. So, but I would think we would want, to Lee's point, us to at least come together with some ideas and thoughts, because our meeting lasted all of really 10 minutes when we met as a committee.
So let's forget the special meeting on the 3rd and have a regular meeting on August 10th. And that way we can have reports from both groups at that meeting.
Yeah, it sounds like you're meeting with Patrick and Bruce potentially on the 3rd.
Correct.
Mhm.
Yep.
Yes, I'll block my calendar right now.
Thank you, everybody. And reports from any village trustees. Mr. Domke.
So I just wanted to let you know that the Sister City German Initiative did a video over the weekend. It's a marketing video to market Roselle with towns in Europe to become sister cities. And if it turns out to be a decent presentation, we'll gladly share it with the village.
Thank you. Anybody else? Village clerk,
No report.
village attorney,
No report, Mr. Mayor.
village administrator,
No report.
chamber of commerce liaison, Patrick.
No report.
Okay. Consent agenda. All items on our consent agenda are considered to be routine, procedural, informational, self-explanatory, and non-controversial in nature, and will be enacted in one motion. There will be no discussion on these items. If I can kindly have our village attorney give us a summary of our consent agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On tonight's consent agenda, we have presentation and approval of the village board minutes of July 13th, 2020, the adoption of a resolution approving an intergovernmental agreement with DuPage County for COVID-19 reimbursement, the adoption of a resolution authorizing a retirement agreement with Patrick Watkins based upon his 27 years of public service, the adoption of a resolution authorizing a contract in the amount of $58,300 for the 2020 pavement patching program, the approval of the 6 parcel payment for the Devlin Influent Pump and Screening Improvements Project in the amount of $344,872.01, and the adoption of a resolution authorizing approval of a payment to Hartford Exteriors for the Devlin wastewater treatment plant roof replacement in the amount of $12,510.
Can I have a motion to accept this evening's consent agenda?
So moved.
I'll second it.
Second, thank you, Wayne. Madam Clerk, can I have a roll call?
Trustee Trejo,
Aye.
trustee Domke,
Aye.
trustee Devitt,
Aye.
trustee Berkshire,
Yes,
trustee Sarno,
Aye.
trustee Poleski.
Aye.
Okay, thank you, and our motion is carried. We're on to our regular agenda under community development, trustee Pulaski.
Mr. Mayor, I move to adopt a resolution authorizing the mayor to execute a contract for professional services between the Village of Roselle and Walker Consultants, canceling the previous contract with updated insurance coverage approved by the village attorney prior to execution.
Second.
Any discussion? Madam Clerk, can I have a roll call, please?
Trustee Poleski,
Aye.
trustee Devitt,
Aye.
trustee Sarno,
Aye.
trustee Berkshire,
yes,
trustee Trejo,
Aye.
trustee Domke.
Aye.
And our motion is carried. Anything else tonight, David?
That's all.
Okay, moving on to administration. Trustee Sarno.
Treasurer's report, Tom Dahl, presenter.
Thomas.
Thank you. Good evening. In your agenda packet tonight is the June Treasurer's Report. In June, the village collected $3,087,000 in revenue and spent $2,090,000 for a difference of almost $1 million. The vast majority of the revenue collected was property tax, as the DuPage County first installment was due. If we compare this to last June, where the difference between revenue and expenditures was $1.7 million. The difference really this year is the loss in sales, eating and video gaming tax due to the coronavirus, and the delay in the sale of vehicle stickers, which actually hit the mail today. Yep. The report follows the traditional format, including the top 10 eating tax contributors, overtime by department, the police department overtime charts, and the water sewer operating results. The fire overtime, if you notice, has been higher, mainly due to the vacancies on the metro side due to the coronavirus. Village employees cover the reduction in force, but there's also a corresponding decrease in our monthly metro costs. And the police department chart for June will show the high overtime for special events such as the protests and for call out / investigations for the previously mentioned shooting on Picton. The revenue charts on pages 129 to 134 of the PDF in your packet continue to show the effects of the virus on village revenues. While some of the village's revenue sources are down, the decline is really not as bad as we feared when the pandemic began. As revenues have come in during the month of July, we have updated the outlook for the general fund through the rest of the year. When the pandemic began, we estimated a deficit of $1.8 to $1.9 million. But based on current trends, we have amended that to approximately $1.2 million deficit for the year. This wipes out all of the gains we earned in fiscal year 2019, as we just presented at the last village board meeting. In July, so in your packet is June, and as I've been trying to do during this time is kind of update you on where we are right now. And in July, for April sales tax is down $72,000 or nearly 25% from last year. Now, this is a significant decrease, but it's better than the 30% drop we had predicted back when this began. Eating tax collections for June sales is down $11,000 or 26% through Friday collections. Again, a significant decrease, but much better than the 50% decrease we had predicted. And kudos to our local businesses and economic development efforts for continuing to be strong in the face of this pandemic. As we end the first half of the fiscal year, caution is still warranted as we face an uncertain fall and the threat of a reversion to phase 3 in Illinois. But results so far have been better than expected, so I concur with Jeff's recommendations that will follow. And I will certainly be happy to answer any questions that anybody has.
Anybody? Yes, Patrick?
I'm just curious why this was thrown under administration and not finance.
Jeff wanted to put everything together into one, so the one report leads into the other.
Okay,
That's for you,
all right,
Jeff.
just curious, thank you.
Yeah. Just to throw everybody off base, too.
See if you're paying attention.
Paying attention?
I'm paying attention, I see you, Tom.
Everybody noticed.
Yes, Wayne?
I want to put in a plug for the village and everybody on this screen, because Roselle is very very good on budgeting themselves. Everybody in this screen has done a good job of managing the money that we're given by the residents. And I just want to give kudos to the village administration and finance and everybody that's making sure that we don't overspend our resources. And we've done that as a history, but it's something to be proud of. I think we should all be proud that we don't go and put ourselves in trouble. Even when there's a pandemic, we're able to seemingly ride the high wave through it. So I want to give everybody compliments. We all done a good job.
There's a lot of services and stuff that we had planned that we had made cuts on, Wayne.
Right,
So,
right.
And, it was being good stewards up front and moving from there. But there are some things that it's gonna take us a long time to catch up with. So, all right, anybody else?
Yeah, quick question.
Yes, I'm sorry, Lee, your hand's in the light there. I couldn't see.
Sorry. So the charges for service, so the Lake Park High School resource officers, I guess what happens, I know Lake Park, at least what it seems like, is they're committing to doing some in-person learning, but I guess what's the contract, or what happens if the school gets shut down? Do we lose that revenue? What happens there?
Sean, I think Steve had mentioned he's meeting with Lake Park administration later this week. So we'll find out a little bit more there, Lee, what type of learning they're going to do, in person, hybrid, or what.
But I guess what happens if they decide to do in person, but they don't want the school resource officer? Is there a contract that says they still have to pay us, or is it just it goes away, or what happens?
We have an agreement with them now, and if I'm not mistaken, Tom, they finished paying despite not being in class for the last quarter of last year. They paid for the.
Yeah, it looks like it. It says that we collected 121,000.
Yeah, and that's correct. They, in fact, Steve sent me the contract, and even if they're not in school, they would pay us for the school resource officer. And he said, and Sean maybe back me up, that the school resource officers were used even though they were not in school. They were there, they were helping just as if they were there. So they did pay all the way through May or June. And in the beginning, I did not think we would get that for the fall. So I had taken that out and I put that back in based on the way the contract reads.
Got it. Thanks.
Anybody else?
Okay. So I think I'm next, Barb, Andy.
I'm next.
Okay. Going to segue from the treasurer's report to our budget response plan. I think Jason's done a quick PowerPoint. I won't try to go too long, but obviously the board in April, May, and June continue to review our budget response and how we're responding to the pandemic. I think we had 5 phases there to match what happens in the pandemic. The first one, seeking reimbursement, any sort of financial assistance to help the village through the crisis. Second one, deferring or eliminating certain capital or operating equipment. Hiring freeze on all vacant positions. Looking at all of our revenue and how we may reallocate. And finally, using operating general operating fund or water and sewer operating fund reserves. I think when Tom mentioned that we initially projected a 1.9 deficit in the general fund, and now we're down to a 1.2. What it's not taking into account is the IGA that you just approved tonight with DuPage County, which will allow us to just under $1 million for expenses related to COVID. And that can be tangible items such as PPE, or that can also be certain payroll expenses for employees dedicated to dealing with COVID. So I think I have a very good feel that our seeking reimbursement for all of that money will certainly help our situation. And that's not factored into Tom's expenses. Also not factored in there is the things we've already done in reducing our operating expenses by almost $300,000 with items that we don't need. More important, recently, the board of directors for both DuCom and DuPage Mayors and Managers, intergovernmental cooperatives that we belong to, have reduced their membership dues combined by $135,000. So I think that has paid off our membership. So I think when you look at that, you look at state grants that we went and have applied for. Certainly we want to be mindful that we're in this for the long game. We're in to understand that the state may have some problems in the future. But based on where our budget is, the status of the pandemic, some of the things that have happened more recently, I think it's important that we recommend we do a couple of things. And Jason, I think if you can flip through some of our slides to our recommendations.
That's Brian.
Brian, if you could do that. Keep going, one more. There we go. So as we had talked about, part of our phase 2 was defer our capital project programming, and mainly the $750,000 street improvement program and the $1.3 million water main program. And we deferred that knowing that we wanted to wait till this year throughout the year to see where we were going to land with our revenues in case we had to reallocate capital project funding to general operating. I think in talking with Karen this late in the year, our ability from a staff perspective to manage those contracts, we defer that until 2021. Unless, as I spoke about in my memo, we've applied to Rebuild Illinois state grants and Department of Economic Commerce and Opportunity for funding to do some of those. If we were to get that, we would certainly rebid the program to do a smaller scale. But our chances of getting that with competition from other communities trying for the same grant funding are probably very difficult. So we would recommend that we defer those to the water main and the street improvement program until 2021. Number two is reinstate or reconvene our zoning ordinance subcommittee. As you recall, we started that last year. That led to some meetings with the board, with a subcommittee of the board. We made that pause. But in this particular situation, we have a community development director that is retiring. We've got to have Jairus, the rather large project occurring on the East Irving Park Road. I believe it's important that we reconvene that committee, reconvene the work of the consultant to help us finish that zoning ordinance update. And finally, in 1 second, I'll defer to Jason. I think we ought to look at our hiring freeze and fill 2 of the 4 vacancies in Public Works. I think we've shown that we need those people in here to do some additional work. Jason will outline why. We still would hold on 3 other vacancies, 2 in the Public Works, 1 in the Fire Department. And then, as you also know, we're going to be working to fill the position of Community Development Director. So I think in total, with our budget situation where it's at, with our reimbursement possibility through the county for expenditures that we've incurred, I think we're in a situation that we can, on the capital projects programs that I identified, reinstitute our zoning ordinance update and fill 2 of our 4 vacancies in Public Works, still leaving 3 vacant. And so if there's any questions leading to that, I can answer that. When it gets to the employees and the filling the vacancies, I'll have Jason kind of go through that.
Any questions from anybody? Okay.
If not, Jason, could you briefly go through why the Public Works positions now?
Certainly, and obviously Karen Young is on the phone call too to speak to anything more specific, but we just wanted to provide the board with the organizational chart so you can see where those vacancies do slot in the overall department's operations. We know we've been going through the reorganization that started last year, and early this year, some of those changes resulted in some of the vacancies with the creation of the foreman position that created internal movement and therefore vacant positions. But really in the totality of being sensitive to obviously the budget, the continual monitoring of that, and weighing that against the operational impact that having 4 people or 4 positions vacant in a department of only 20 something people, I think it's only for so long that you can weather that impact. And certainly now with the mechanic position particularly, and the need for that approaching the winter season here, it's a technical position. It's one that certainly is extremely important to the organization in maintaining its fleet, and that really void that needs to be filled as a result of the elevation of a current mechanic to the foreman position and the duties that position has assumed as a result of the vacancy in the manager position. The other one is the engineering technician that retired in April and looking to come back to the board with a little additional justification at the next meeting. Sort of in support of that is an anticipated retirement of our civil engineer sometime next year. And certainly with the deferral of capital projects, there'll certainly be a lot of work to be due leading into fiscal year 2021. And in that year, that is the justification really for the civil engineer and kind of retooling the existing engineering tech in of a higher class employee position. So that's really those 2 positions, and obviously continuing to hold and further evaluate any additional vacancies in the organization.
Bruce, did you have something you wanted to ask?
It was more of an ad. So as the liaison to Public Works, I concur with Jason, but this is also a timing issue. The 2 individuals that would be leaving, that these would be replacing, we would need to make sure that knowledge transfer is there. We can leverage this timing. And then also simply as one is moving on and has been promoted, we need to fill that spot before our heavy winter season comes in, when we will need that vehicle mechanic. So it has a timing effect to it as well.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay. Thank you, Jason.
Thank you,
Moving on.
man. That's good.
Jeff, did you have something you wanted to add?
As long as the board concurs with my report, then we'll move forward.
Everybody?
Yes, I do.
Yep, I'm
agree.
good.
I agree.
Hey, thank you.
All righty. Moving on to 10C, Barb.
Recommend the adoption of a size, weight, load, and permit ordinance for the permitting and enforcement of overweight and oversized vehicles within the village. Brian Jonas, presenter.
Good evening. So the memo that you have in front of you and that most of you read kind of reveals current internal process that we have in the Public Works Department that monitors and tracks over-dimensioned vehicles utilizing village streets. Currently, the process results in a already permitted county or state transporter of either heavy equipment or oversized weight, height, or load vehicles contacting the Public Works Department, filling out a form, and that being passed to the police department so everybody's aware. However, the current process is a little informal. It doesn't capture the revenue needed to offset the construction and repair costs of our streets. And the ordinance itself is pretty vague in terms of enforcement and what those size limitations are on our current streets. So we propose that a new ordinance is developed and kind of rescinds the truck routes current ordinance in its entirety, and then creates a permit process, more formal process that will allow staff to better monitor and track these vehicles, also capture revenue, and then give that informant piece that we need to ensure that these vehicles are following the proper guidance provided by state law. So the one recommendation that we have is to utilize Oxcart permit systems for the permit process itself. It's 100% free to municipalities, provided that the transporters pay a rate on top of the current permit fee. So we currently have a draft ordinance in place. It's been through Public Works and Police, and will be provided to legal for review and could be presented at the next village board meeting. So I have Karen and Sean here for questions that you may have, and we can get to it.
Any questions from anybody? Patrick?
Just wanted to update those that are watching this. So the cost of this would just be $400 that the village would occur by leasing a scale, but projected revenue is a little over $2,000. So I think this is a great thing, and I just wanted to share that with those that are watching it. Thanks, Brian.
Sean? You're on mute. We have officers that are trained in this field now, or we would have to train?
We had them trained. Unfortunately, with COVID, they're not able to continue their training, so we would have to re-up on that training. The cost is not an issue. It's a matter of the training classes being offered again. As long as COVID keeps shutting these training classes down, I can't give you a projected date as to when that would happen. I'm hopeful we can get somebody through this fall, but otherwise it would probably be spring or next summer.
And you would have an officer assigned to a shift on that, or is that how that works?
Yes, sir. In the past, we always had 1 or 2 officers on every shift that were certified truck officers.
Okay, and would that also obtain, or would that training give them for any truck or just oversize?
Any truck, any trucks to go to the scales, yes, sir.
And then how many do you think the oversize that we're getting through town that have been missed about?
We had 47 permit forms filled out last year.
Okay. Any discussion other than that? We in favor of moving forward, or we need a vote on that one?
I'll second that.
Seems like a good idea. Obviously, you can still get deliveries from 18-wheelers on occasion, right? They don't have to have permission if they're bringing like a furnace to a house or something, right?
As long as it's a direct route, yes.
Right, okay.
Okay. First and second, Madam Clerk?
I'm sorry, who made the motion?
Yeah, Barb?
Barb? Okay.
And Patrick, second.
Patrick, okay, trustee Sarno,
Here,
Aye.
okay, trustee Devitt,
Aye.
trustee Berkshire,
Yes.
trustee Poleski,
Aye.
trustee Trejo,
Aye.
trustee Domke.
Aye.
And our motion was carried. Okay, moving on to 10D, Barb.
okay, recommend approval of a 3-year extension to the agreement between the Village of Roselle and Prescient Solutions for ongoing professional information technology services. Jason
Second.
Podolsky, presenter.
Okay. Any discussion? We got two options there.
Yeah, that's all I'm really looking, direction from the board is obviously one to renew or to extend with Prescient. It's from, it's really the economics. Kind of worked on 2 options with them, and one being a 0% for the next year with guaranteed rate increases of 3% in years 2 and 3 of the contract. Option 2 is a 2% increase this year. And then the existing CPI language that's in the contract would stay in there. Therefore, any increases in years 2 and 3 would be kind of subject to the negotiation of the parties. I presented kind of the total 3-year for each of those, and you can see the cost difference there.
David?
No, I think it makes sense. I guess with this being our 3rd renewal, I would just want to next time just go out to bid and just see if there's any change in the marketplace with that. I think they've done a fantastic job, but after that long of a time with them, I just want to make sure we're not too far off from the rest of the marketplace.
Okay. Anybody else? Option 1 or 2?
I like 1.
1.
1.
Okay. Majority of the board's on 1. Can I have a roll call?
Okay, so this is a roll call to support a 3-year contract extension using option 1. Is that correct?
Yep.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay, trustee Sarno,
Aye.
trustee Trejo,
Aye.
trustee Berkshire,
Yes.
trustee Domke,
Aye.
trustee Devitt,
Aye.
trustee Poleski.
Aye.
Our motion's carried. Okay, anything else tonight, Barb?
That's it.
All
Thank
right, moving right along to fire. Patrick, we have nothing for you.
Nope.
Police, we have nothing for Wayne. Public Works, nothing for Mr. Berkshire. Finance, Mr. Trejo, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to make a motion to approve the accounts payable list for July 27th, 2020 in the amount of $921,774.08.
Second.
Any discussion on the bills list? Madam Clerk, can I have a roll call, please?
Trustee Trejo,
Aye.
trustee Domke,
Aye.
trustee Devitt,
Aye.
trustee Berkshire,
Yes.
trustee Sarno,
Aye.
trustee Poleski.
Aye.
Our motion is carried. We have anything else tonight, Mr. Trejo?
That is all, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. We have no executive session. Other
No.
business for discussion.
Jason, if you could take that.
Yeah, under there is a staff update on seeking further direction from the board on AV upgrades in the council chambers. I believe a previous meeting staff noted, or maybe an elected official, David, may have noted that the DuPage County appeared to utilize COVID reimbursable money through the CARES Act that they received to do upgrades in their meeting rooms to accommodate sort of this virtual meeting arrangement, one that could support both in-person attendance at meetings as well as virtual attendance in meeting, and sort of blending those two together. So the village reached out to the vendor who DuPage County approved a proposal from to get a cost estimate to do a similar boardroom AV system upgrade that would allow people to participate through Zoom as well as in person, and syncing those up so the Zoom meetings or through Zoom. The meeting would be on the televisions in the council chambers, so people physically in attendance could see everyone virtually in attendance. And then the audio would be digitized in both in the council chambers through the AV system, would then be the audio feed into Zoom. That proposal is $50,000, and it includes video cameras in the council chambers. And so roughly 30,000 of that 50 is equipment, and then the other 20 is installation and some other programming and other kind of professional service costs. So before, I guess, pursuing anything further, getting any additional quotes, staff wanted to provide the board an update on that technology, that cost. It would likely be COVID reimbursable through the county, assuming that since they did it, that it would also fit the definition. It would certainly support the continuation of encouraging people to stay at home, to, I guess, work for you all, work remotely as elected officials. It would continue to provide, I think, maximum public participation, as it would continue to accommodate digital participation, but also the in-person piece, should that be something that the board wants to reinstitute or may be required to reinstitute, depending on any change in as it relates to the Open Meetings Act and allowing virtual meetings to continue. So I just wanted to get the pulse of the board to see its interest level in having staff pursue this any further.
Anybody? David?
I mean, it's steeper than I would have liked, obviously. I know when we first talked about this almost 4 years ago, it was around like 8,000. So, but do we have an idea about when or how the state of emergency is going to continue to exist? Because that's how we're functioning right now. If that goes away, to my knowledge, we have some barriers to continue to operate this way. And we would have to go back to the boardroom as well as public if they want to be heard or to participate. Is that a fair depiction of it? And do you guys have an update as far as the timeline for what that looks like?
Under the Open Meetings Act, there's kind of a two-prong to allow virtual meetings 100% like this one, where you can have a majority of board members not being physically present. And that's a state of emergency from the governor, a similar state of emergency from the Department of Public Health, as well as then the mayor is kind of stating that we will have virtual meetings. But it's a unknown how long the local state of emergency will be continued. I know the mayor, or the governor re-upped it this past weekend for another 30 days. If the governor chooses not to do it, the Department of Public Health, I would assume, and I'm based on nothing other than my gut, that they'll continue to have this until we're in phase 5 and there's a vaccine. I don't know how there would not be a public health crisis as long as there's still the virus and it's spreading and continues to do what it's causing through the pandemic. So, which, phase 5 is really to be determined when we would reach that vaccine or otherwise eradication of the virus.
Okay, that's helpful. And is there a deadline for when we would have to submit this for reimbursement from the county for the CARES Act?
December 30th.
Okay.
Are they
Thank
taking
you.
proposals?
I would, Mr. Mayor, I'd be in favor of at least looking at it. I mean, David is correct. We did look at it 4 years ago, but I think, with current situation, we can at least revisit. But I also want to make sure an understanding of what we would be, not only what is the technology and the capabilities, but what would we be envisioning when we are out of this state of emergency. So I'd like to get some ideas of what our game plan is.
Lee?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think it's fine to get an updated proposal, especially since we have some more time here until December 30th. The other thing I would say is if you could put together, number one, I know we've been asking about it, but just keep continuing to update us on how many people are watching this online, because that helps just kind of put everything into context. And then number two, Provide a perspective on how long this equipment's good for, because it's gonna, if it's $50,000 and it's reimbursed this year and it's only good for 2 years, then we have to pony up 50 grand in 2 years. So I just want to know like the product life cycle for this stuff.
Good point. Wayne, did you have something?
Yeah, I just want to make sure that I didn't misunderstand. And I do agree that it's good to check this out because, you know, difficult times require difficult decisions. Did you say that you know for sure it's reimbursable, or you think it might be because it was reimbursed to the county?
Yeah.
And then would it be we front the money and then we're reimbursed, or would they, is that how it would work?
Jace, maybe I'll answer that. I
Yeah.
think you read the IGA with the county. The county has the option of accepting a reimbursement request or not. So I think this fits in the guidelines, but at the end of the day, per the IGA, the county has the choice of saying yes or no.
Mhm. That's something to check out. I would agree to check it out.
I think we could do that in advance while we're doing some of this other research. We could reach out to the county.
Bruce?
That was going to be my question, is because is it an after the fact? So we pony up the money and then they can make a yes or no decision. I would much be in favor to get a better sense of what is the likelihood then, because we may not
Yeah.
it might not be something we want to do if we're deferring other projects and we're not going to get funded for this. This would be the low thing on my totem pole.
Yeah, we were just talking about being good stewards, so.
Yeah, I was looking for the word free.
Yeah.
Nothing's free, Wayne. Nothing's free.
All right, Jeff, do you have direction
I
or?
think we can answer all those questions and bring that back to the board as quickly as we can.
Okay, thank you. Anything else?
Yeah.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Okay, can I have a roll call?
Trustee Devitt,
Aye.
trustee Trejo,
Aye.
trustee Domke,
Aye.
trustee Sarno,
Aye.
trustee Poleski,
Aye.
trustee Berkshire.
Yes.
Right.
And I thank everybody for their time this evening. Have a great evening.
Thank you.
Night.
Good night.